Señoras y señores, muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a nuestra Facultad de Ciencias Veterinarias y Pecuarias de la Universidad de Chile. Es un honor para nosotros, como facultad y como Universidad de Chile, poder recibirlos hoy aquí para poder escuchar la charla magistral del economista Benny Dembitzer. Damos la bienvenida a los invitados que nos acompañan hoy y saludamos muy especialmente a las autoridades del Ministerio de Agricultura que nos acompañan. Señor Claudio Dembitzer González, subsecretario de Agricultura, señor Ángel Sartori, director nacional del SAC. Saludamos también a la vicerrectora académica de nuestra casa de estudios, la doctora Rosa Debs, y a todas las autoridades y académicos de nuestra facultad presentes el día de hoy. Le damos las gracias a todos por acompañarnos para dar inicio a esta actividad. Dejo con ustedes al decano de nuestra facultad, doctor Santiago Ursilay Vicente.
Buenos días a todos. Profesor Benny, welcome to your house. Doctora, en el público, allá. La doctora Debes, vicerrectora académica de nuestra universidad, vicedecano, especialmente un saludo al exalumno de esta facultad, el doctor Claudio Dembitzer, que fue alumno mío, no parece. Cuando venía en la mañana en camino a la universidad y decía, había leído yo el currículum de Benny, y yo dije, es lo que realmente nosotros necesitamos en nuestro mundo, esa mirada donde es muy importante la tecnología, es muy importante la ciencia, pero ¿dónde está el hambre? ¿Dónde está la pobreza? ¿Dónde están los problemas de la gente? Y de repente nos perdemos, no tenemos a lo mejor herramientas para eso. Por eso es que estaba muy entusiasmado por escuchar a Benny en su charla, porque realmente ese es el camino que de alguna manera nuestra sociedad, estoy hablando de la sociedad latinoamericana, está necesitando. Fíjese que decía, bueno, cayó el muro de Berlín, una cosa imposible de poder mover. Ayer supimos que se rehacen las relaciones entre Estados Unidos y Cuba. ¿Cómo se puede llegar a esos avances y no podemos llegar a estos otros avances que llevan a una comunidad que quiere ser más feliz, que quiere ser más solidaria, que quiere ser más cercana y decir, tenemos que tener una solidaridad de destinos, porque estamos todos en esto. Y esa es una cosa que debemos enseñarles también a nuestros estudiantes. Me entusiasmó mucho tu currículum, Benny, y espero poder estudiar y un poco más profundizar, porque nosotros en nuestra facultad, y creo que en nuestra universidad, tenemos que hacer más impronta este tipo de conocimiento, este tipo de experiencia, este tipo de deducción. Así que solamente decir que muy bienvenido, Benny, aquí y a todos los que nos acompañan para poder escucharte atentamente. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, señor decano. A continuación, el subsecretario de Agricultura, señor Claudio Dembitzer, nos entregará unas breves palabras en nombre del Ministerio de Agricultura.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todas y todos. Un cariñoso saludo a nuestro gran invitado hoy día, Benny Dembitzer. Por cierto, a nuestro decano, mucho cariño, a la vicerectora académica de la universidad, a la señora Deves. Y bueno, contento y un honor para mí también poder estar hoy día acá, en esta gran ocasión de recibir a nuestro Nobel, ¿no es cierto?, que nos prestigia con su presencia para hablarnos de un tema tan relevante como el que nos va a escuchar hoy día. Decirles que para nosotros, como país, y en particular el sector de la agricultura, este es un tema, por cierto, que nos interesa sobremanera y tenemos compromisos como país, el Ministerio de Agricultura en particular, fuertes en materia de alimentos, ¿no? Hace pocos días se celebró justamente el Día Mundial de la Alimentación y ahí pudimos renovar nuestros votos con la FAO en esta materia, donde pudimos, ya habíamos en la última reunión regional de la FAO que se hizo precisamente en nuestro país, con la presidencia de nuestro ministro Carlos Furche, pudimos allí cerrar los compromisos, ¿no? Dar cuenta primero de lo que habíamos avanzado como país en materia de cumplir con los compromisos en materia de alimentación, en materia de lucha contra la pobreza. De hecho, nuestra presidenta, la presidenta Michelle Bachelet, recibió un premio por parte de la FAO por haber conseguido una meta relevante como país en la lucha justamente contra la pobreza, ¿no? Y el hambre, en este caso, que es una preocupación fundamental de FAO, ¿no? Por cierto, en nuestro ministerio estamos absolutamente comprometidos y en esta celebración del Día de la Alimentación, como digo, pudimos renovar estos votos, ¿no?, de compromiso para, en dos planos, por cierto, colaborar como país a tratar de minimizar, hacer nuestro aporte, humilde aporte, a reducir la hambruna del mundo, a abastecer de alimentos de origen especialmente agropecuario para el mundo, que así lo necesita una población mundial que, como nos va seguramente luego decir usted, ¿no es cierto?, crece tremendamente y no alcanzan los recursos. Por tanto, la importancia que tiene el sector nuestro para poder contribuir a la alimentación mundial. Pero no solamente queremos contribuir en términos cuantitativos, sino que también en calidad. Y Chile hoy día tiene ventajas para aquello, ¿no? Y queremos aprovechar esas ventajas nuestras de poder llegar con alimentos, digamos, de calidad, inocuos, sanos, para, por cierto, la población nacional, los ciudadanos, pero también para el mundo, siendo Chile un país de gran fuerza exportadora, hoy día estamos optimistas porque está en buen pie el sector exportador nuestro y esperamos entonces poder seguir contribuyendo y de esta manera contribuir, por cierto, o digamos, honrar los acuerdos que hemos tomado con la FAO. Decirle que, sin duda, la oportunidad tremenda más allá de nuestro país que tiene la región, seguramente usted va a connotar eso también, ¿no es cierto?, la región de Latinoamérica como gran proveedor de alimentos al mundo, ¿no? Y allí hay una tremenda oportunidad para la región nuestra, pero es cierto que nosotros no queremos estar ajenos como país a esta realidad de la región Latinoamérica, que hoy día se suma también, ¿no? Y donde encontramos cada vez más disposición de los países del mundo a acercarnos para colaborar en esta materia, porque el mundo unido, solamente de esa manera, será posible avanzar en este gran desafío que es de todos, ¿eh? Lo que señalaba el decano recién, que bueno, este gran acercamiento de nuevo, gran acontecimiento de acercamiento de Estados Unidos con un país de nuestra región como Cuba, que yo creo que apunta al mismo objetivo, que estar unidos en función de una serie de objetivos, ¿no es cierto? Y este es uno fundamental. Bueno, señalar que para nosotros adquiere una prioridad particular dentro del sector agrícola el mundo de la agricultura familiar campesina, de los pequeños productores, ¿eh? También compromiso con la FAO es de apoyar en particular a este sector para hacer que superen las brechas, las distancias que los separan todavía desde una productividad plena, insertarse, por cierto, que también tienen oportunidades en los mercados externos y, por cierto, afianzarse en los mercados domésticos con su producción que es cada vez más valorada, y nosotros del Ministerio de Agricultura estamos encaminados justamente a darle un valor a esa producción y a permitir y darle herramientas al sector de los pequeños productores y las pequeñas empresas agropecuarias a que puedan insertarse en los mercados, insertarse modernamente en una productividad con incorporación de tecnología, con incorporación de recursos que le permita realmente superar las brechas que todavía nos separan, ¿no es cierto?, del progreso y de la productividad, y lo más importante, que saque a un importante sector de nuestro país de la pobreza, porque la pobreza que está representada todavía en nuestra nación tiene un particular y mayor dramatismo en los sectores rurales, donde ahí se hace más dramático y muchas veces el efecto de la falta de recursos, de la falta de una actividad económica que le permita salir de la pobreza y progresar, por cierto. Y también aquí se conjuga otro elemento que no es menor, que también ese sector, si no le damos todas las herramientas necesarias, influyen de mala manera en la protección de los recursos naturales, ¿no es cierto?, y atenta contra la sustentabilidad también del sector rural, del país en general, si no hacemos realmente algo para que puedan hacer una explotación racional, por cierto, productiva, eficiente, pero racional de los recursos naturales. Así que, doctor, muchas gracias por venir a Chile, de parte del gobierno de Chile, agradecer su presencia acá, y estamos, por cierto, dispuestos a escucharlo con mucha atención. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, doctor Dembitzer. Quiero comentarles que debido al interés que hay por esta actividad, está siendo transmitida por streaming a través de nuestra casa de estudios a la comunidad científica y al mundo. Muchas gracias nuevamente, doctor Dembitzer. Ahora dejo con ustedes al doctor Cristóbal Briceño, joven académico de la Facultad de Ciencias Veterinarias y Pecuarias de FABET, quien introducirá en el día de hoy al doctor Dembitzer.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Tengo el honor de presentar a Benny Dembitzer, quien durante casi medio siglo ha contribuido al desarrollo económico y social de varias naciones del tercer mundo, y además a quien tuvimos, junto al doctor Elbe y a la doctora Navarrete, el placer de conocer en Cambridge el año 2010 cuando organizamos la cuarta versión de Encuentros. De padre polaco y madre rusa, Benny nació en Holanda, donde pasó su primera infancia. Cursó primaria en Bélgica y continuó sus estudios secundarios en Italia, por lo que goza de un nutrido repertorio de lenguas, con 7 idiomas a su haber. Estudió economía en la Universidad de Cambridge, bajo la tutela de Amartya Sen, quien posteriormente, en 1998, recibiría el Premio Nobel de Ciencias Económicas por su contribución al bienestar económico, teoría de selección y justicia social. Durante los años 60, Benny fue académico para Trinity College en Cambridge. Luego se radicó en Londres para formar parte del equipo del Economist Intelligence Unit, donde trabajó 4 años. A principios de los 70, asume la dirección de FIA, o el Fondo de Investigación e Inversión para el Desarrollo de África, con presencia en 20 países. Durante 2 años fue asesor para el Commonwealth para el desarrollo industrial de 9 países del sur de África. A lo largo de su carrera, Benny ha trabajado en 35 países de África y 2 países de Asia. Así trabajó en Aga Khan, en Pakistán, en Etiopía para la Organización de Desarrollo Industrial de las Naciones Unidas, para el Centro de Comercio Internacional en el Reino de Lesoto, en Djibouti para el Banco Mundial, en Guinea e Indonesia para el Programa de Desarrollo de las Naciones Unidas, y para el mismo programa desarrolló el Plan Económico a 5 años para Gambia y Liberia. Durante los siguientes 5 años fue consejero económico para el Programa Holandés de Ayuda a Indonesia, y también trabajó para el Programa de las Naciones Unidas para combatir el SIDA, conocido como UNAIDS, en Addis Ababa. Adicionalmente, Benny ha trabajado para varias agencias voluntarias como Oxfam en Etiopía, Care International en Lesoto, el Servicio Voluntario Internacional en Botswana, Camerún, Lesoto y Suazilandia. En los años 70 trabajó en misiones encubiertas para Amnistía Internacional en Gabón, Camerún y Chad. Además, fue uno de los impulsores de la iniciativa Fair Trade International, inaugurando en 1973 la primera oficina en Londres, que actualmente tiene presencia en todo el mundo. Benny era director europeo para la Iniciativa Internacional de Médicos para la Prevención de Guerra Mundial, cuando en el año 1985 le fue otorgado el Premio Nobel de la Paz. Ha sido consultor en temas de tráfico de armas para Transparency International, una coalición global contra la corrupción, y también ha organizado operaciones de rescate en Etiopía. Entre 1987 y 2006 estuvo a cargo de los eventos anuales de Global Partnership, una iniciativa que reúne a más de un centenar de organizaciones que contribuyen al desarrollo de naciones pobres. Durante 2007 y 2008 fue consejero económico para Africa Invest, una organización no gubernamental que invierte en actividades de desarrollo para agricultura en Malawi. Actualmente es director de Ethical Events, donde voluntarios contribuyen con trabajos en eventos como, por ejemplo, festivales, y las organizaciones a las cuales ellos deciden apoyar reciben el equivalente monetario. Además, actualmente también es director de Grassroots Africa, una organización sin fines de lucro que está implementando ayuda de especialistas internacionales en forma gratuita, a través de un servicio de consejo directo y en dialectos locales, con el fin de apoyar la agricultura de pequeños campesinos en África. Finalmente, su ajetreada agenda incluye partidos de tenis que juega religiosamente todos los días contra su archienemigo en la cancha y amigo fuera de ella. Y los vecinos de Benny, en Dulwich, en Londres, dicen que a veces entre 7 y 8 de la mañana se escuchan cosas como "If you do that again, I'll kill you. And try to do that again, I'll chop your head". Esa pasión en la cancha es la que Benny transmite en cada cosa que hace, recientemente reflejada en sus 2 últimos libros. Uno de ellos, The Attack on World Poverty, Going Back to Basics, del año 2010, y el último, que es Sleepwalking into Global Famine, The World Cannot Feed 9.3 Billion People, del año 2012. Sin más, quiero recibir con un aplauso a Benny Dembitzer.
Perdóname, por favor, de que no hablo castellano, también hablo italiano y puede comprender el chileno. You know, some years ago, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, the Queen of England, you'll have to forgive me because I'm a British citizen now, and I think about the Queen of England as someone quite important. Is it okay if I speak without the microphone? Sorry.
Bien, no pueden.
Can you hear me to that? Yes, thank you. Yeah, for the screen. Yes, okay, sorry. Right, the Queen of England, and as I say, that, you know, I always think of the Queen as someone terribly important, but perhaps not very relevant, but very important, was invited to a very good grand dinner at the Bank of England to celebrate the establishment 250 years ago of the bank. And she didn't realize the microphones were still on. You know, the kind of scandal that you hear occasionally, terribly important heads of states start to tell the truth because they think the telephone is switched off, the microphone is switched off. So the Queen of England, okay, thank you. Thanks. So the Queen was heard to turn round to the governor of the Bank of England and say, Mr. Governor, with all these terribly, terribly clever people, how come that no one saw the financial crisis coming? Very good question. Very good question. And that, if I may, is going to be the theme of what I'm going to talk to you about, because I want to share with you what I think is a very, very serious issue which we are not staring in the face. It's hidden in the open. And it is that we are walking without realizing and without understanding into a global famine. We really are. We already know we are walking into global climate change and that nothing is happening because they are meeting one day in Lima, one day in Paris, one day in Rio de Janeiro. Is there any real change? Come on. You know, will someone tell me that there is change? No, there isn't. Will it be another financial catastrophe? I don't know. Does anybody here in this room know? Perhaps you will tell us. Could it be another Ebola hitting the world? The Black Swans, a fabulous book written some years ago by a bloke I think is of Egyptian origin called Nicholas Talib Nasser. And he is called The Black Swans. Because you see, for the last few thousand years, swans have always been black. Have always been white, of course. Because swans in Europe are white. They've all been always white. So one day, someone went to Australia, wherever that may be, and they came back and they'd seen a black swan. A black swan? That's not possible. Swans are white. So he called this book The Black Swans, and global famine is one of the black swans. It is happening, it's hidden in the open, and no one is actually realizing or doing very much about it. Now, in your field of work, you're very much concerned, as the Undersecretary was saying, with issues of poverty and obviously with the issue of food. Now, I'm going to extremely quickly cover an enormous number of issues, and if I press the right button, it's going to be even easier. Oh, yes. And you'll have to forgive me for going extremely fast. I've been told that I've only got 3 hours to keep you in this room, but I hope to be able to do it within an hour and to have a bit of questions and answers as well. Now, the issues that affect food, and you know it better than me because I'm a mere economist, and economists are horrible people. I would not allow any of my daughters to marry one of them. Climate change, population, the weakness of the farmer in the light of the issues that have got to be met, the trouble with aid, and possibly leave you with an agenda and some ideas of the kind of things that you could do, and as the Undersecretary and then the team have referred to. So, why is it important to start with the climate change? It is already, of course, affecting the poorest of the world because there is no irrigation. Now, I don't know about Chile, but certainly in most of Africa, and forgive me for referring just to Africa because that's the part of the world I got to know, as well as Indonesia. But this is my first time in Latin America, and I'm not going to pontificate, particularly with a quote that comes from Latin America about what is right and what is wrong. Most of the poorest world depends on natural rain. And if that changes, obviously the poorest are in a mess. And this is exactly what is happening now. When I go to places like Malawi, Tanzania, Uganda, where I work primarily at the moment in this project that Krista referred to called Grassroots Africa, I go to villages with friends, with colleagues and so on, and it is quite clear that already it is happening. The seasons are changing. Global climate change is already there. The deserts are advancing, and it's not a figure of speech. When I went to Africa the first time in 1969, I said, oh, when people say that the Sahara is advancing 3 kilometers per year, it's a joke. But then I was taken by a botanist, and he showed me how the vegetation that you would see at one edge of the Sahara, at an edge of the Sahara, the Sahel region to the south of the Sahara, a year later, it was further south. A year later, it was even further south. 10 years later, it was 30 kilometers further. The deserts are marching on. They are expanding. There is no doubt about that. This is true for the Kalahari, as well as the Kalahari in the southern part, as much as it is for the desert in northern Namibia, and it is for the Sahara. Now, if the water comes down not only at different times and in different quantities, suddenly you have 2 meters of rain coming down in a period of 3 days, the farmer doesn't know when to farm. She doesn't know when to plant. It's a woman. It's always a woman. Because, you see, this is one fundamental issue that we in the development world, and I hope you don't, I see that there are probably an equal number of men and women in this room. In most of the poorest world, it may happen in Chile as well, the man is mobile. He goes out to look for a job. He becomes a miner, perhaps, in Chile. In Africa, he might try to do some mining. He will try to become a builder on a building site in a big city. He may try to work as a paid worker on some bigger farm. The woman is at home. She looks after the babies, because there are always lots of babies coming up in the world. She looks after those who are sick. She looks after the older members of the community. And she is therefore the cook, she's the teacher, and she is the farmer. She is immobile. And in that sense, the woman is the agent of change. And we don't understand that fully. Now, because the seasons are changing, little beasts, you specialize in big beasts and little beasts, so sort of bugs of all types. So you know better than me that when there are distinct seasons, little beasts die, the pests die, and then perhaps the next one there will be new beasts arising in your fruit, in your vegetables, in your gardens. Now the problem, of course, is that if the distinction between winter and summer is disappearing, these little beasts remain in the seeds and don't die. And the next season, they re-emerge intact. And on top of that, because of globalization, you're getting dengue fever in Chile, aren't you? Aren't you lucky? You're going to get malaria if there is more global warming. So these new diseases are on top of the old diseases. What is the result? The result is that the woman doesn't know how to plant and at what time of the year to plant. So the new bugs are just one other aspect, another punishment. There is less capacity to knowledge, to cope, because traditional knowledge is not sufficient when the whole of your environment, physical and social, is changing. You just can't. Things are different. So you might have lived in a particular part of the world for 10,000 years. people have not survived in the Kalahari Desert if they've not developed very, very sophisticated social mechanism to cope. They wouldn't have survived, but they have managed to survive because they developed very complex social mechanism that the outsiders, we who have come to liberate them from poverty, don't understand. And the social anthropologist, who is the most important person in development, is remarkable by her or his absence. So, if you were rich enough, and I read occasionally the local newspaper, and I've just been corrected by the dean and the undersecretary that I probably have been reading the wrong newspaper, so I shan't mention the name of the newspaper that I've been reading that is available in my hotel. But the poorest cannot cope with some of the issues that you are all concerned with in this country. For example, protection from floods and from earthquakes and so on. They are at the receiving end. Whatever happens will happen. They cannot protect, they cannot invest. There is no capital. And this is where I think quite often, when we talk about capitalism, we miss the point. If there is no capital, what is the driving force? It's not capitalism, it's power. It's power of the man over the woman, the traditional chief or the head of the clan or the king over its own people. So it's an issue of power as far as I'm concerned, and it's not an issue of capitalism. Now you will say that this is not an argument of Karl Marx, but of the comedian Groucho Marx. Well, perhaps I would agree with you, but Groucho Marx I find much more interesting and much more fun than Karl Marx. And just to make it even worse, the rate of change is actually accelerating. And around the equator, it has already come to the very end. So now, let us look at the issues of population, right? How many people are affected? My friends, no one has a clue. No one has a clue. Don't believe the World Bank when it says that 1.4 billion people live below the poverty line of $1.25 American dollars per day. They haven't got a clue. If you look at, for example, on samples and you multiply, you apply the sampling techniques to totally different societies, including societies where the concept of recording a child who might have died at birth simply doesn't exist. You can't get any real data. So I find it very strange. You see, the World Bank and most authorities always think about GDP, what you call the PIB, right? Hang on a second. You know, in Europe, 2 months back, we all revalued the GDP of European countries by, I can't remember the exact percentage, but I know that in the UK, the GDP of the UK suddenly went up about 2 months ago by just short of $10 billion. 10 billion pounds, I'm sorry, 10 billion pounds, which is probably about $15–16 billion. Now, why? Because the European Union decided that prostitution and drug taking, cocaine, heroin, and so on, would be included as activities within the GDP. And this is one of those incredible things that, you know, you don't believe me. Well, I assure you that in this world, the more operations are taking place on hospital beds, and the more accidents in our roads, and the higher our GDP. We have got the wrong priorities, and the World Bank with us. You know, in parentheses, just to tell you why I don't think the World Bank is full of extremely clever people, you know, very, very, very clever people. I worked for the World Bank for a while. I wouldn't tell you that it was stupid, because then I would be one of them, wouldn't I? So, no one, all right, sorry, I was going to go and tell you some silly joke. You know, the World Bank publishes most of the reports, or all of the reports it has, on its website. Now, the Washington Post did a study of how many times some of these reports are downloaded or not. And it was quite fascinating to see that 31% of the World Bank reports have never been downloaded. You don't believe me, you see? Because like you, if I had any family or any friends or any neighbors, I would torture them until they downloaded a report that I had produced. But not one, because the World Bank doesn't have any family, no friends, no neighbors. But they are produced for the sake of producing. And that is not the real world, into my mind. So we are using the wrong data. But how many people, according to UNICEF, probably about 1.2 billion people are in hunger, and between 10 and 30,000 children die per day. Children die per day, between 10 and 30,000. We have no idea. But you see, FAO, that the Undersecretary may refer to, also adds another group of poor people. And the first time I had come across it, it may well be that many of you will be more familiar with this because it's your field of work. There is the issue of hidden hunger, and this is where micronutrients are absent. Thank you very much. Now, when you don't have any zinc or iron or other micronutrients in the perhaps in the first 9 months when you're not yet born, and then the mythical 1,000 days of UNICEF, you will never develop your mind and your body fully. And you see, in Ethiopia, 52% of the children grow stunted. Stunted means not just that their bodies have not developed, their minds have not developed. And it can never be remedied. You grow without those micronutrients, you suffer for the rest of your life. Same situation in Rwanda, exactly the same percentage of people. So the hidden hunger adds another 1 billion people to that figure. So already we know that 1 in 7 people on Earth are in permanent hunger. And the population of the world is growing fastest in the poorest areas, because having children is something that is natural to humankind. Selecting the children, how many we want, investing in children is the privilege of the rich. People in this room, you and I, who speak the same language and communicate in the same way. But you see, using the Millennium Development Goals, we miss the point. One of the Millennium Development Goals is that the vast majority of children will be enrolled in school. I think that half by the end of 2015. I can't remember. But what about the quality of education that comes out at the other end? Why are we not concerned with that? Right. Kenya has every year 1 million new Kenyans coming into the world. Now you are all much more mathematically minded than me, and you've got those wonderful little machines that can also calculate. Divide 1 million by 365, and you've got 2,700 kids being born every day. Now they need schools. They would need every single day 1 school of 50 classes, capable of holding 50 classes of, I got lost in the maths, of 50 kids to be educated. Those schools are not being built. According to the UNDP Development Index, 30% of all the children in Africa go to a primary school in the language which is not spoken in their homes. In other words, they go to school and they have teachers who teach them, but they don't understand them. And by the time they are perhaps in the third year of the primary school, they might have learned enough to catch up what they've been taught 2 years ago. So the quality of education is going down. There is no way out. So among the Millennium Development Goals, there is nothing about the quality of education. Among the discussions of the Sustainable Development Goals, there is, as far as I've seen, no reference to the quality of education either. The result is, my friends, that there is an ever greater division between those who have access to education and those who do not. In other words, those who can progress well, like we in this room, and those who will never be able to get on the first step of the ladder. And I'm going to say something which I hope does not offend you. When the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates and terribly grand people, WHO and so on, talk about more vaccines for babies and new children, I do not understand, perhaps you will be able to explain to me, the morality of allowing more little babies to live in the first 3 years of their life to die of starvation at the later stage. I do not understand that logic. I'm a Christian. I don't think that's very relevant, but I do not understand that morality that enables us to judge which way society should be going in other parts of the world. Let's go back to the farmer. The farmer loses out in most of the world, and this is a phenomenon that you know very well in Latin America, because of lack of land security. Now, you have had the Reforma Agraria in Chile, very interesting, perhaps not complete, perhaps not everybody's happy, but you've had a reform, and the first steps have been taken to what seems to me empowering the poorest. Most of the world, this has not taken place. It just has not taken place. So in some of the poorest countries in the world, Ethiopia, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it always makes me laugh, you know, it's not democratic, it's not a republic. Last year was called Zaire, you know, so I don't understand why it's called democratic. Sorry, Minister, I never win a prize for diplomacy. Please don't invite me to join your government. When you're not sure about who owns your land, because the big man in the city, the landowner, or just someone with a lot of money can push you out because he's more powerful. He is more powerful. Then you don't know where you are. Now, a very clever Peruvian economist called Hernando, I've learned, thanks to you, Minister, for teaching me the proper name, or was it you? I don't know. Anyhow, is called Hernando de Soto. Wrote a book which I understand is more popular in Europe than it is in Latin America. It's called Why Capitalism Works in the North and Fails Everywhere Else. And one of the things he argues, apart the fact that we need institutions that work, a police that functions, a judiciary that functions, land registries that work, government bureaucracies that work, is that we ought to enable the poorest in the world to own their own land. Because then they can either go to a microfinance institution or to a bank or to someone else and ask to have some funds against that land. And that would enable them to invest, to get better tools, and so on and so forth. They also might prefer to sell the land and go to the city and do something else. But the land grab is taking place very much now. Now, why is this now stopping? Doesn't like me. Will someone come in and give me a hand, please? Now, in a number of countries, in a number of countries, patents are taking, some of the multinationals are taking out patents on traditional seeds. For example, in Ethiopia, there is a grain called TEF, T-E-F-F. Because most of the land of Ethiopia is very high, there are 20 mountains over 4,000 meters. A cereal has developed, a grain-based cereal, of which there are about 300 varieties, and it is the local staple food. The government of Ethiopia, fortunately, was able to resist one of the big companies that was trying to buy out the DNA, to work out the DNA, and then patent it. This happened with the government of India resisting the way in which seeds of basmati rice was going to be patented, and then the farmers would have to buy back the seeds that she or he, in the case of India, has been able to use for free over the last millennia. But of course, we now become an interesting conundrum, because if the multinational companies into seeds have got to improve the seeds to make them able to resist changing weather, less water, more salinity in the land, they've got to work on them. And the result of working on them means that the DNA changes, the GM resulting from it, will not be available to the poorest farmers. And the poorest farmers is therefore condemned, unless new measures, and that means intervention, is actually developed. Now, why does the price of oil matter? Because it affects, above all, the fertilizers. Fertilizers rely on oil. Now, we know that the price of oil has gone down in the last few days. Do you think it's going to last? Hell, it's not going to last. Come on, man, or woman, please. It's not going to last. It's going to, historically, it's rising because of scarcity. So the energy work that you're doing, and that I've been listening to in the last few days of the conference on solar energy, fantastic new way to add locally power to the fertilizers that are required. Otherwise, they will be impossible for the poorest of the world. Not just the poorest, but the poorer. They will be totally at the mercy of much more powerful forces. Now, here again, this is something that's an appeal to you in Chile. You know that there are varieties of every grain, of every fruit, of every animal even, that has developed to resist because it has been sympathetic to its environment. Now, by nationalizing them, by globalizing them, we lose the ability to have different seeds and local varieties in favor of international agreed standards, which require then new types of fertilizers, new types of insecticides, new types of everything, all again reliant on oil. So it is moving the farmer from a present situation which is not easy, but in a direction which I would argue with you is getting worse and worse. Now, again, there is another phenomenon that does affect very badly the farmer in the poorest parts of the world, is that that of the subsidies given to by rich countries to producers in their own societies. The farmers in the USA are extremely well subsidized. Now, I don't know whether you subsidize them very much here in Chile. They probably are not a very important lobby, not as important as it is in the USA or as important as it is across Europe. It's very strange. I suppose it's a quirk of nature, but I find it very strange when the EU now is finding ways to preserve the environment. It gives, obviously, money to the big farmers not to plow. That is what's happening in Europe now, in Western Europe. So the big farmers, who are obviously desperately poor, get the bigger grants. The little farmers, unfortunately, have too little for the bureaucracy to be able to cope with loans or grants of $10,000, $20,000. So it's the poor Duke of Westminster who owns a huge chunk of London, or Queen Elizabeth II who again owns a huge bit of land. They are the poor people who must receive subsidies not to farm. My goodness, this is economics gone wrong. Are there any economists here? Please, will someone tell me how we rectify that balance? We cannot rectify it. It's the same as someone I was talking to just before we came here, who says, when I was little, my mum says, eat because in Africa they're starving. And he said, why don't we send it to Africa? We have all been there. We have all seen that. And there is, you see, I am not against the multinationals per se. They've given me the world in which I'm so privileged to live, and most of us here. My world is dominated by Coca-Cola, the Ford Corporation, Microsoft, and so on. But there is a limit. And the limit is the incompetence of global governance. The global institutions have not been able to tame the beasts that are the transnational corporations. And we need stronger intergovernmental governance, and it is not existing. Look, the budget of the United Nations in New York, and you will know it, Minister, is less, the ordinary budget, I don't mean the peacekeeping operations, which are specially budgeted and financed. The ordinary budget of the United Nations in New York is less than the budget of the police and fire department of the city of New York. I kid you not. Those are the order of dimensions. It is a scandal. Now, this is not to say that more international bureaucrats traveling, of course, poor people, first class, staying in 5 or 6 star hotels and having huge meals and discussing over huge meals while poverty, of course, that is not what I'm talking about. That is that's the entertainment part. The real part is that we need better international regulations with better capacity to inspect what is happening for all our goods, for the quality, as the minister was saying, the food safety is an absolute vital component for all of us, for all our futures. Now, the subsidies that are given to farmers is monstrous, and it enables the global market for food to be very badly distorted in favor of the larger players in the game. So we had the possibility of aid. Okay, aid, unfortunately, is a very, very short-term measure. If a community has managed to survive for 5,000 to 6,000 years in a hostile environment, aid for 5 years or 10 years is just ridiculously short. Now, I don't blame the politicians. You, Minister, have got to be re-elected, don't you? Well, you hope you're going to be re-elected one day, and you'll have to please the electors in the short term. You may not want to think short term, and you know that there are issues that are extremely long term, but the mechanisms at your disposal are not there. The heads of the transnational corporations, if they don't deliver a nice dividend every year, will be out looking for a job, possibly cleaning the streets and chasing the dogs in the veterinary faculty here at the University of Chile. Poor people, they will be out of a job. Only scientists, you people, have a clear idea that issues of global climate warming, salinity, changing in the GM capacity of plants and so on, are long-term projects. And I was asking at the conference the other day, how many scientists are there in the cabinet? Now, you, Minister, might be able to respond. In the UK, we don't have a single one. Do you have anyone in Chile? Possibly. Okay. you know, it's that nice, it's nice. Ignorance is such a blessing, and I'm sorry I didn't give you notice of that. So aid is certainly very much, short term. It is also very much at the mercy of the donor. The donor decides what he or she is going to give. Again, let me give you an example of what I mean. It's not necessarily in food, although I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, the Gates Foundation, as you know, is the greatest benefactors that we have seen, in living memory, really the greatest. Melinda Gates, the wife, who is co-director or co-president of the foundation, hosted a conference not long ago on the women and reproductive health, or the reproductive health of women. And one of the development of the Millennium Development Goals. She held it in London and decided, and this is shows that she's a courageous, independent-minded person. She's a Catholic, and she had the issue of birth control on the agenda, in spite of the Catholic Church obviously saying, no, you cannot talk about that. But a number of organizations of women around the world also say, please talk about abortion. Because, probably 300, 400,000 women a year die of abortion, after abortion. So they were begging, please put abortion on the agenda. No, we don't do abortion. So whose reality, my friends, whose reality are we taking into consideration in international policy making and international decisions relating to aid? Now, when it comes to food aid, we got another issue. Food, international food, is a series of decisions made ad hoc. A very good organization called Oxfam USA made a study of the amount of the cost of food in 2008, and there is a reason why that figure is so far out of date. Under the US aid program, about an enormous quantity of food from the US went to Africa. Now, Oxfam calculated how much less it would have cost to buy that food in Africa and generate local activity, encourage local farmers. $800 million. It was more expensive because it had to be bought from American farmers, transported in American ships, delivered through American helicopters, using American petrol and American airlines and so on and so forth. And Oxfam decided not to become a distributor of that food, which is why that study has never been done again. Now, again, whose policies does that kind of aid for food aid really help? Now, the food is quite interesting. Official aid to agriculture, official aid, sort of aid from governments to governments in the South, decreased every single year from 20% in 1986, and every year it was 2% in 2006. Because we didn't want to had to help them or use aid money to develop the agriculture of the poorest countries of the world. Now it has picked up, but we are nowhere near what it was in 1886. Because the free market was going to deliver. Free market? Ask Brazilian cotton growers if there is a free market in cotton. Ask corn growers anywhere in the world, if they are not North American, if there is a free market in maize or in wheat. Now, there are 5 companies in the world that control 90% of the international trading of soft commodities. Bunzel, Brazilian, Dreyfus, French, I think primarily, Cargill from the United States, I've forgotten who was B, the ABC, and then D, and then Glencore. But they are going not so much to suit their own priorities, all right, fair enough, feed their own people. Already President Obama had to admit in February of last year, 2013, that only about 40% of the US aid going to the purchase of food was actually going into food. 60% was going to the companies. Because you need to have supervisors, managers, they've got to travel to international conferences, they've got to do this, and the other. 40% of the money is spent on the actual food. Again, distortion in the mechanism. And it is an oligopoly. There is no free market. And when UNICEF or the World Food Programme, I would advise you, if you're interested in these issues, to subscribe to some of the material that they send you. In the last few days, they have been sending press statements saying, we've had to abandon the program of feeding in the Central African Republic. We have had to reduce the program of helping Syrian refugees. We have had to to reduce the program in Libya. We have not been given, this is the World Food Programme, Programma di Alimentazione Mondiale, has not been able to cope with its tasks. Look, we are a very, very, very rich world, well, globally, all right? World GDP is roughly $65 trillion, right? Now, okay, about a quarter of that is the USA, perhaps another quarter is China. Again, we're not quite sure of the figures because the measurements do not exist. But I know it's not comparing like with like. Total global aid is about $120 billion. But the more interesting figure is remittances, and you will know about remittances because you will know people who are sending money back to your countries, to Chile and to Africa, the Philippines, Bangladesh. It is already over $400 billion last year. Okay, so the poor are helping themselves. We are almost a little bit extra. But as you have seen from some of the data that I've given you, it's not a really total free meal. Okay, now, some challenges to you, because you're young, capable, ambitious, and want to contribute, and I appreciate that. Total, you want to contribute to making a substantial change. What can we do? Well, I will start from here. Chris, you've done something. Please come back here and press the right button. Thank you very much. Now, you will see that in my book, the first thing that has got to happen in the poorest countries is that we are clear that the poorest must be the owners of their land. Now, this to me, the policy of Hernando de Soto. The poorest must have access to land. They must have a cadastro, is that what you call it in Spanish? In Chilean, a cadastro, which exists in no country in Africa, with the exception of Rwanda. And it was introduced after the Rwandan massacre. Because, again, my friends, one of the reasons for the catastrophe of Rwanda, where 800,000 people were massacred in 100 days, was competition for land. There is not enough land to survive. So Rwanda is the first country that has introduced that. Right. Now, we need to provide education for all. Now, again, it means the farmers, the women farmers. In the 1950s, the World Bank, at the beginning of its life, did a study on how rapidly could farmers be educated? And it was the first study of its kind. And this was the 1950s. It was known that women farmers with just 3 years of education were becoming better farmers. With just 3 years. Now, with all the IT, with all the wonderful machines that you have got in your little hands, or that I've got on my desk here, there must be means to make education relevant to everybody across this country, across this world. Sorry, I do mean across this world, because I know that you have a very clear policy of education for everybody. You are a country that has gone through hell, and you have come out of hell. And it was one of the most beautiful things for us in the UK. Sorry, it sounds patronizing. I'm sorry. No. For someone like me who reads the daily papers and watches the BBC, watches Al Jazeera, watches CNN, to see in this country 2 extremely clever ladies fighting for the presidency, whose families had been totally in opposition one to the other, able to solve the differences through discussions and then a vote. My goodness, only democracy can do that. And here is a lesson, perhaps even a more important lesson, Minister, that Chile can teach the world. Democracy for all, the capacity for all to understand the process of participation in the future of the country. We need to encourage and develop social structures. This is not something that transnational corporations can possibly understand. My very bright colleagues at the World Bank had never heard the word cooperative, because the cooperative works for the benefit of all. There isn't a bottom line. God knows whatever a bottom line is. I wouldn't be able to find it if I look for it in the dictionary. But cooperatives where people help one another, a community like this one is, in which there is care for one another, for the environment, for the animals that you work with, and so on and so forth. Now that is the approach that we should encourage, not the triple bottom line, the bottom line or the triple bottom line. I've already said, and I hope you remain convinced, that women are the agent of change. We must encourage microfinance. Now, this is not big finance. This is not the big banks that I see on the high streets here. It's the kind of work that perhaps some of you are involved with, lending $3, $5, $10. I was very privileged to do that in Indonesia. And the dynamics of the micro enterprises are fascinating to watch in a village, where you borrow $5, you go to the bigger town, you buy, say, 20-day-old chick, you bring them back to the village, they produce the eggs, and you sell the eggs to this lady, and that lady, and that lady, and that lady. And within 2 months, you can repay. And then the next month, another lady can borrow some money to buy one of those terribly old-fashioned sewing machines. You remember the old Singer? How could you remember? You're much too young.
My mom has 2 of them.
2 of them. Ah, okay. Your mom did the right thing. She probably started to make uniforms to enable the kids. Yes, indeed. You use that, or you use your pedal, didn't you? And by doing so, a woman can start making very simple clothing so that the kids can be sent to the school. Because even in the poorest communities in the world, moms and dads don't want their children to be humiliated because they go to school in rags. Come on, we know that. Quite a number here are parents. Well, if you're not parents, you probably have had a mother at some stage. Right, so, those kind of little industries, those are the ones that we have got to encourage through microfinance. and we need to train the farmers, obviously. And this is an opportunity for you. So, because I'm in a veterinary school here, and I was told, remember that we deal with one of the essential elements in the cycle of life. Please, help the farmers to understand the role of animals in their lives. Farmers do not know about reproductive cycles of animals, believe it or not. I find it very interesting. Recently reading, that the UK got involved in some wonderful war in Afghanistan. We were thoroughly beaten by the Taliban, and now the Taliban are winning again, and we are going back home. Okay, right. But at one stage, it was quite interesting that British troops, I'm talking about 10 years ago when they first arrived in Afghanistan, discovered that the farmers did not know that the goats could only produce milk when they were lactating. They did not understand that. I mean, I think, I find it unbelievable, but it was documented. And as a result, the army started to hire veterinarians to help them understand the cycle for the animal. The same cycle, I suspect, that some humans have, well, the better part of mankind. That kind of level of education is required. There are some extremely interesting examples. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hafer project, under which it was started by the American National Union of Farmers, I think about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, where semen from a high-quality bull is sent to a village and donated, so that an animal there is going to be inseminated, and the first bull that comes out has also got to be used to donate its semen to the next one. So now there are similar projects for goat and I suspect other animals. A splendid idea, a very, very simple idea, because the value of the animal, when the farmers understand it, is enormous. And of course, they look after it, they put their energy, they put their money into it. Now, we are all extremely competitive animals. I want to be a more clever economist than the next one. Well, I don't. I'm too old. I don't care. But all of you want to be better veterinarians, better this, better the other. And the temptation of the transnational corporations, which have made our world, is to get the best brains from around the world, the next generation of discoveries, and so on. Can that be resisted? Now, very, very difficult moral choices, but essential. And are we taught about this? Are we encouraged to think about these issues? No. Certainly in the UK universities, we are encouraged to take money from tobacco companies to study why some people get cancer and other people do not get cancer. Is that the kind of temptation that you have in universities in this country? I hope you don't. Tobacco, alcohol, sugar, the toxic industries are the most globalized industries of all. So let us have the courage to resist the temptation for unending growth, because it doesn't work. Innovative solutions to animal health. I came across a project which is absolutely fabulous, I think, in Kenya, and has now spread to Tanzania and Mozambique and Uganda. And it is very simple. You need a veterinarian to dispense good quality medicine to animals, right? They suffer from a range of diseases and so on. So this lady got a PhD on studying goats in Ethiopia. Goats in Ethiopia, my goodness, some of us study the most incredible things, But there it is. She got a degree out of studying goats in Ethiopia. I got a degree of studying 16th century Tibetan pornography. No, I didn't. Sorry. This lady decided to enable companies that sell veterinary medicines to set up clinics around these places, and has encouraged veterinarians to set up, to run these clinics, so that they get a bit of money from consultation. Of course, you could take your sick animal, but they also get some money from selling the medicines. And that has enabled the local people to get rid of some basic diseases. It is still initial, it's only been going on for 3 years, and it will take many more years. But that's a splendid idea. And with a bit of luck, it will develop. Do something similar. Come out with ideas which will not get you perhaps enormous amounts of money, but will certainly buy you a good place in heaven, if you're interested in that. And the value added of animal byproducts. Most of the poorest farmers, certainly in my experience, have no idea that the skin of the animal, the bones, the horn, are really very, very valuable assets. They have no idea that, for example, on the Chicago abattoir, the value of the byproducts is higher than the value of the meat. You know, so as an economist, I find that quite fascinating, but there you are. And I've already mentioned, people do not understand the value of animals in the cycle of life. You do. It's a daily fight that some of you have in reconciling and understanding this, the conundrum involved. Education, education, education. Okay, you'll be glad to know that I'm coming to the end. And I would like to sort of say to you that we have been told over and over again that the problems are global. No, they are not. They are parallel. There is hunger here and hunger there and hunger there. There are education challenges in this country that I heard you talk about yesterday. There are education challenges in Africa, as I've mentioned. They are not global. They are parallel, my friends. They are parallel. And therefore, the solutions have got to be adapted to the local needs and to the local possibilities. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Muchísimas gracias, profesor Dembitzer. Es un honor para nosotros contar con su presencia acá, en nuestra facultad, y más aún en nuestra universidad, facultad, acá con nosotros. Thank you very much for having us. And it's really an honor to us having us here. Thank you very much. A continuación daremos espacio para una ronda de preguntas. Para realizar las preguntas las pueden hacer directamente en español, en inglés o bien en español y serán traducidas aquí en el público.
Otherwise, it cannot be streamed.
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for your nice presentation. We have had a chance to talk a lot, but I would like to know, in this dichotomy, when we're running out of land, what's your vision on the one side, try to produce more food by using things like monocultures or genetically modified organisms, and on the other side, try to preserve natural ecosystems and the services they provide. So my question is, how do you think these two could be somehow
Reconciled.
exactly?
Well, they cannot, can they? It seems to me that if you're asking me a question that has no answer. First, but let's go back. Yes, there has got to be intensification of agriculture. There is no doubt, because we are losing something like 7 square kilometers of land per day, of arable land worldwide, according to FAO. So that is a very serious challenge. But you see, we are caught again in another cycle. More and more land is used to grow food for animals. Now, Brazil is doing that on a colossal side. And obviously, the better off people in China, perhaps in Indonesia, in Turkey, in India, want better food. It will be beef, it will be pork or whatever. And as you know better than me, animals are very bad converters of food. Talking to a veterinarian at the conference, I discovered that the figure that I had, for example, for translation, if that's the right word, from animal protein to pork, is one ton of vegetable protein to 7 tons of vegetable protein to 1 ton of pork. So very bad converters. And for beef, I believe it's 1 to 11. But if someone knows better, please tell me, because I will carry on telling lies otherwise. Right. So we have got to resist that temptation. Because at the end of the day, you see, look at it from the farmer's point of view. You export, you export, you export. And who gains from the export? Now, I don't know about Brazil, and I don't know about Chile, but I can tell you that in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, the exporters of the coffee make good money, thank you very much, and with that they import the televisions, the radios, the new bath with gold cups, of course, if you can, the 4x4 cars. The money doesn't go back to the farmer. So that if the land were owned by the farmers, even in Brazil, I suspect that we see much less export because people would be producing more for their own needs. Okay, the other half, and this is where you need to tell me, because I don't know as much. Changes to plants and animals have always occurred. Farmers have always selected the varieties that are slightly better, resistant to lack of water, resistant to greater salinity, and so on. And farmers have also forever been able to use a cutting from a tree to put it to another tree to grow it. Okay. How many farmers actually know how to do that? It's a small number in certain societies. I came across a bloke at Cambridge who taught in Ghana for a couple of years, and he told me that the farmers didn't know that you could transmit diseases from fruit tree to fruit tree. But we all know that you can do that, but what rule is there for the farmer to actually know that? They don't. Back to education. Okay, another element. I think that there is a substantial difference between GM and traditional improvements, traditional methods of cultivation and so on. And I hope that this is what can be encouraged. Because once the farmer has to buy the fertilizers and the seeds and the whatever it is, she is on a different plane, and she has entered an infinite cycle of borrowing and returning and repaying interest and possibly you losing her land at the end of the day. So yes, we need change, but it isn't the change that is being dictated by transnational corporations. We need to be aware of the limits of that. I don't know if it's the proper answer. It's the best I can do.
Thank you very much for a wonderful talk. My question is rather personal. In your long career, academic and working on development, you must have changed your vision at certain points. Maybe not just continuously. Maybe there are moments of awareness that comes at certain moments. Where does it come from? Has it changed? How has it changed? And which have been these sort of forces for change in your own views?
It is a very personal question, and I will try to answer it in a dispassionate way. I am the product. I was born before the war, the Second World War in Europe. I changed, when Cristobal introduced me, he said, I speak 7 languages. No, English is my 7th language. Quite a difference, because I went, my parents were Polish and Russian, and I was born in Holland. I was an orphan, a refugee. I changed my culture 3 times very early, by the time I was 19. Now, I've therefore been part of the flotsam and jetsam of society, of the society. The flotsam and the jetsam is the rubbish that floats on the river, right? And I've been part of that. Now, I spent a year in Ethiopia trying to administer a program by the United Nations of 42 different projects to improve their productivity, small-scale industries, handicraft, local tools for local people, sandals for local people, carpets to be exported, 42 projects. The largest single group of those projects were leprosy patients. I feel I've been privileged, not because I'm a saint, not because I'm a saint. I was able to help some of the poorest in the world because of my knowledge and my education. Now, if anybody in this room who had that experience would have done the same as me, I'm absolutely sure. I'm absolutely sure. I was involved in the Ethiopia relief operations in 84, 30 years ago. And I went on some of the, I had a very marginal part to play. We were sent as groups to try and map the area where the airplanes had to drop the food. So I was with an advance party on an helicopter, and we had sheets, bed sheets, which we put on the ground so to mark where the airplanes who could not land would drop the food. So we did that. And then we radioed the planes from Addis Ababa to come and drop the pallets of food that local people were waiting to do that. So I went into a village that was nearby, where the American Red Cross is set up an emergency facility. And it was full of very small children who were fed intravenously because they were obviously very close to death. And I'm white, and I was wearing a white shirt, and I was obviously a doctor, and Paolo calls me a doctor, and I've got no doctorate at all. I have plenty of other degrees. But obviously I had a doctor, and a mother gave me a child because I could cure that child. And you never recover from that. You never recover from that. And I'm reminded of Dom Elder Camara. You remember who said, when I help the poor, I am called a saint. When I ask why they're poor, I'm called a communist. Sorry, I get very, very upset to this day when I think about that scene.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Yes, I would like to tell you that it was a very interesting talk, very, very interesting, and I would like to ask you what's your opinion about urban agriculture. I know that it's a very important activity in Africa in some countries. People can recover their knowledge on farming and producing their own food. And what do you think about it?
I've seen examples. Sorry. I've seen examples of that, but I think that they're over-exaggerated. There isn't the space. There is not the space. But more importantly, I'll start from another way. I did a job for the UNDP in Guinea, in Liberia, writing the 5-year development plan for the country on behalf of the UN, which sounds a terribly grand job, but it's a very small economy. So it's, dealing with Santiago, the city of Santiago, is probably more difficult than with the economy of Guinea when I did it. And we went around and talked to various people. I was staying in quite a nice hotel, thank you very much. And I spent some of my spare time, Saturday, Sunday, talking to the executive chef in the hotel, because I was interested to know where he bought the food from. Would he buy it from local villages? Would he buy it from local women farmers or some other place? And this was an hotel that was owned by a foreign company, right? I can't remember, it might have been British or American. And the chef told me, I'm not allowed to buy local food, because food from Europe and the US comes as a package. We sign a contract, and on Monday they deliver half a ton of fish, on Tuesday half a ton of this, on Wednesday half a ton of that, and so on. The only thing I'm allowed to buy is a few local fruit, pineapples, guavas, whatever. I can't even remember what they are. And that, to me, is indicative of the power that we have over the food supplies and the food deliveries locally. In Malawi, recently, I was talking to a local, terribly clever Malawian who is helping to provide technological advice to women farmers to transform the groundnut to a quality where it can be mixed with local meal and with local wheat to provide biscuits for infants, for toddlers, once they stop lactating and they need something a bit solid. He was saying that the market was totally local, very, very limited, because when he tried to sell it to the big agencies that were distributing food to Malawi, the answer was from UNICEF, which has got a huge program of delivery of biscuits to toddlers. I'm sorry, we awarded the contract globally, and this company gets the right to distribute it for everybody. And believe it or not, it was not a Malawi company. There is no evil there. It's just it's back to why can't I leave my food, Mom, and I'll send it to Africa that your mother will, and that was your cloud. It's the same. Economics has got to be changed to cope with those issues, and it does encourage. See, one of the things that many economists get totally wrong: the city can be a very important motor in the growth of local agriculture, but there must be connections, and the connections do not exist. Because there is no transport from the rural areas, there are no facilities for refrigerating or storing, there is no advance to encourage farmers to diversify. When you went to Haiti and everybody was selling the same thing down the road, it's because it all came from China, I suspect, but there was no one who was going back to the villages and saying, why don't you produce this? And you produce the other, and you produce the other. And by differentiating, you get an economic development along the lines that all our societies have developed. But you don't do that when you know that one thing can be developed, can be produced, but you know nothing about the next thing. Back to information, back to education. Sorry, I'm delaying everybody's possibility.
Doctor, I want to put not the easy question, thinking about the support of the science and academic work. If the genetic manipulation of the foods, in your opinion, is a solution or not for the climate of the world?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is a solution. It has got to be part of the range of solutions. But you see, I don't know about the policy in Chile, but for example, in the UK, a lot of the basic research is paid for by the state, by me, my wife. In fact, I'm retired, I don't get enough. But my wife does all the work. She goes to work every morning. She pays a lot of money, and my patron gets paid in the army and research on GM. Great. You see, so long as we, the state, we, the citizens, get back from the investment what we have put in, as opposed to some terribly good company, which is much cleverer than the government of Chile or the government of the UK, and realizes that there is a market opportunity. So that, to me, is the difference. No, we must have GM. Of course we must. But, you know, with caution. You can't send people who don't realize that perhaps they use this seed, but they cannot keep a bit of seed back to plant next year, because the seed is sterile. But you need to know that, because your traditional varieties, you know, are reproduced year after year after year. They might be less capable of surviving the changes. It's a fundamental difference.
Bueno, muchas gracias por haber asistido. En este momento quiero agradecer especialmente al subsecretario por venir a nuestra facultad, quien comprende y ve la importancia del tema de alimentos a nivel global y a nivel local, a nuestra vicerrectora por acompañarnos, y bueno, por supuesto a Benny por esta increíble experiencia. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Our team will present you with a little person. Muchas gracias a todos. Y para finalizar, quería comentarles que el doctor Dembitzer vino a Chile traído por la conferencia Encuentros, que es una iniciativa que tenemos con un grupo de amigos, y esta iniciativa busca reunir investigadores y mentes chilenas alrededor del mundo, y este año lo hicimos en Chile, para reunir investigadores y mentes brillantes acá. Y como iba a faltar Benny, así que a través de las gestiones con el doctor Luciano y la doctora Cornejo pudimos traerlo a la facultad, y creo que es realmente una excelente oportunidad. Muchas gracias por estar acá.